Have you ever wondered if your children have quietly taken over your life as you age? As we step into our 60s, 70s, and even our 80s, the lines between love, duty, and silent resentment can get blurry, especially when it comes to our children. It may start with love and support, but over time you put your needs last, stay quiet, and lose control of your own time. In this video, we're diving into 5 quiet but powerful signs that you've unknowingly become a slave to your children. Not, say, a parent, not a mentor, but someone stuck in a role that no longer serves your peace, health, or dignity. And here's why you should keep watching. Some of these signs may feel oddly familiar, but until you name them, you can't change them. Naming them might just help you reclaim your time, your choices, and your sense of self. Stay tuned until the end, because once you recognize these patterns, you'll see how small shifts can bring big freedom, not just from obligation, but toward a life that still belongs to you. Now, let's get started. Sign 1. Constantly putting their needs above your health. One of the clearest signs you've slipped into servitude is when your children's needs repeatedly come before your own physical and emotional well-being. It might seem noble at first, skipping your checkup because they need a babysitter, pushing back your medication refill to help cover their bills, or driving across town in pain just because they asked. But over time, this kind of pattern drains you both inside and out. When you consistently make choices that neglect your own body's signals, you're not just being generous, you're disappearing. You may tell yourself it's just for now, or that's what parents do, but when just for now becomes months or years, the cost becomes undeniable. Psychologically, this kind of behavior can stem from deeply rooted identity roles. Many older parents have built their sense of value around being needed, but there's a difference between being needed and being used. One brings fulfillment. The other erodes you day by day, and here's what makes it so tricky. Your children may not even realize it's happening. If you never say no, they assume you're always available. If you never show discomfort, they assume you're always fine. The cycle continues not because they're cruel, but because you've trained them unconsciously to believe that your limits are endless. Take Mary, a 74-year-old grandmother from Ohio. She started babysitting her daughter's 3 children 5 days a week after retiring. It was supposed to be temporary, but 5 years later she was still spending 40 hours a week caring for the kids, missing her own book club, doctor visits, and even a long-awaited trip with friends. She loved her grandkids dearly, but eventually, she admitted she didn't recognize her own life anymore. If this sounds familiar, it's time to ask yourself a hard but loving question. Are you helping out of choice or out of fear of what might happen if you stopped? That distinction can tell you everything you need to know about where you stand when your health and peace are constantly sacrificed for someone else's comfort. You're not parenting, you're surrendering, and you deserve better. Sign 2. Feeling guilty for saying no. The second sign is subtle but powerful. You feel guilty every time you say no, even when your reasons are perfectly valid. Guilt is a normal emotion, but when it becomes your default reaction to setting healthy boundaries, that's not love, it's emotional conditioning. Over the years, many parents fall into the habit of equating no with failure. They believe that if they don't show up every single time, they're somehow letting their child down. But that's not true, that's not love. That's guilt wearing a disguise. Here's the psychological root. When you've spent decades prioritizing your children's happiness, it can feel wrong, almost selfish, to prioritize your own. But growing older doesn't mean you owe them more. It means you've earned the right to reclaim space for yourself. If your child reacts with disappointment or frustration when you say not today or I need to rest, ask yourself, are they responding to the boundary itself or the fact that you've never set one before? There's a saying among therapists. The first time you set a boundary with someone who's used to having none, they won't see it as healthy. They'll see it as betrayal. That's not your problem. That's their adjustment. For example, take Roger, a 79-year-old retired teacher from Florida. Every Sunday, he drove 2 hours each way to mow his son's lawn because, as he said, "My son works hard and I want to help." When his knees started bothering him, he hesitated to say anything. Eventually, when he did mention it, His son offered to hire a gardener but added, "I just thought you liked doing it." Roger realized he'd been suffering in silence, not because his son was demanding, but because he had never voiced his own limits. If you say yes out of guilt, not joy or willingness, that yes becomes a quiet form of resentment, and that resentment doesn't just sit still, it grows. Saying no when needed doesn't make you a bad parent, it makes you an honest one who respects themselves enough to choose wisely, rather than be ruled by obligation. If you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 2 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Now let's move forward. Sign 3. Giving financial support you can't afford. The third sign is one that many older parents fall into without realizing how deep it goes. You continue giving financial support to your children even when it stretches your own limits or puts your retirement at risk. Let's be clear. Helping out once in a while isn't the issue. The problem begins when giving becomes a pattern you can't sustain yet feel too obligated or too afraid to stop. Money is never just about money, especially within families. It carries deep emotional weight: love, duty, guilt, fear of abandonment. You might think, what kind of parent would I be if I didn't step in? But ask yourself this: what happens when your kindness compromises your own stability? When you're hesitating to turn the heater on in winter just to cover your daughter's rent, or delaying medical care so your grandson can go to summer camp? Here's the hard truth. Sacrificing your well-being for your adult child's comfort isn't noble. It's unsustainable. Often it doesn't even serve them. It can create dependence, not resilience, entitlement, not appreciation. And it sets a precedent that says, my needs come second always. Take Helen, 74, who quietly withdrew from her monthly walking club to save gas money. Why? Because she was sending $300 a month to her son, who just needed help getting on his feet. But that help had been going on for 3 years. When she finally mentioned she might need to cut back, her son replied, "But Mum, you always said you'd be there for me." And that's the moment Helen realized he didn't see her as someone with limits. He saw her as a resource. If giving causes stress, resentment, or fear, it's no longer giving. It's a transaction you feel forced into. And that's no way to build a healthy relationship. You have every right to say, I need to put myself first right now. You're not turning your back on your child. You're simply stepping into your own adulthood again, one where your security, peace, and dignity matter just as much as theirs. And that's not selfish. That's smart. Sign 4. Being emotionally controlled by their reactions. The fourth sign is subtle but incredibly powerful. You find yourself adjusting your mood, your decisions, even your sense of peace based on how your children react to you. If they're distant, you worry you've done something wrong. If they're upset, you scramble to fix it, even when you don't know what you did. If they're cold, you shrink. If they're kind, you breathe again. This kind of emotional tether isn't love, it's captivity. When your peace depends on someone else's temperature, you've lost something essential: your center. It may have started decades ago when they were toddlers, and you had to regulate everything around them to keep them safe. But they're not toddlers anymore, and you're not just their parent, you're also your own person. Emotional dependency like this shows up in ways we rarely talk about. You delay plans with friends because your daughter might call and need to talk. You say yes to things you don't want to do just to avoid the silence on the other end of the phone. You replay conversations in your head, wondering if you said something wrong because they seemed off. And the worst part, over time, it chips away at your self-trust. What you think, what you want, what feels right to you, because you're too busy monitoring their reactions like a thermostat. I remember George, a 78-year-old man I met through a community support group. His grown son in his 40s rarely called unless he needed something. But if George didn't pick up right away, he'd get a passive-aggressive message. Guess I'll figure it out myself. And George every time would feel like a failure. A man who'd fought in 2 wars and built a business from scratch, reduced to a nervous wreck over a single missed call. If that sounds like something you've experienced, you are, not alone. Many older parents find themselves afraid to upset their children, walking on emotional eggshells to keep the peace. But ask yourself this: what kind of peace is it if it comes at the cost of your own? You don't need to earn their love by constantly managing their emotions. Real love doesn't demand that you silence your own. If your presence is only welcome when you're useful, silent, or agreeable, that's not a relationship, that's servitude. You deserve space to breathe. That's not rejection, that's self-respect. If you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 4 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Now let's move forward. Sign 5. Giving up your own needs to keep the peace. The 5th sign may not always feel dramatic, but it's one of the most exhausting forms of self-betrayal. When you stop honoring your own needs, your own comfort, even your own pain, just to avoid conflict with your children, you brush off your back pain so you can babysit. You skip meals or appointments to drive them across town. You say yes when everything in your body is whispering no, and you tell yourself it's love. But deep down you know it's something else. It's fear. Fear of upsetting them, fear of being called selfish, fear that if you stop overgiving, you'll lose them altogether. This isn't about one act of kindness or support. Every parent sacrifices. That's part of the role. But when the pattern continues into your 70s and 80s, and when your own health, time, and energy get constantly pushed aside, you have to ask, is this still love, or is it imbalance? It's easy to fall into this trap when your identity for decades has been wrapped around being the provider. Even after retirement, even after your body starts slowing down, your mind keeps saying, keep going, they need you. But the truth is, your needs matter, not just in theory but practically. You have the right to rest without guilt. You have the right to say not today without explaining yourself. You have the right to prioritize your health and your peace, not as a reward, but as a baseline. I once spoke with a woman named Carol, 74 years old, who had recently collapsed from exhaustion. She was caring for her adult daughter's 2 young children 5 days a week, while managing her own diabetes and arthritis. When I asked if she'd ever told her daughter she was tired, she said, "Oh, I couldn't do that. She might think I don't love them, but here's the thing. Love doesn't mean self-erasure. If someone only accepts your love when it comes at your expense, they're not receiving love. They're consuming you." The hardest part, the boundaries you never set in your 50s or 60s become the expectations you're held to in your 70s and beyond. Every time you ignore your body's cry for rest, every time you override your own needs to avoid disappointment, you're teaching yourself that your worth is measured by how much you endure. But you're not meant to live your final decades as a background character in someone else's story. You've earned the right to live for you without apology, without proving anything. And that starts when you stop negotiating your worth with your children's approval. You are not here to be the cushion for everyone else's chaos. You're allowed to take up space. Final thoughts. Maybe some of what we've talked about today hit a little too close to home, or maybe it just made you pause and think, wait, when did I start putting myself last? The truth is, many loving, well-meaning parents fall into this pattern without ever realizing it, because it doesn't feel like slavery. It feels like duty, like love, like doing the right thing. But when that sense of responsibility starts to erode your health, your peace, your identity, that's when it's time to stop and ask, am I still living my life, or am I surviving someone else's? If you recognized even one of these signs in your own life, I want you to know something. It's not too late. You can still redefine what respect looks like in your family. You can still build new boundaries that protect your energy. You can still take back your time, your voice, your worth. Because love that costs you your freedom isn't love, it's imbalance. So be brave enough to speak up, be wise enough to rest, and be kind enough to yourself to start choosing you. Thank you for joining us today. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and share one thing you learned today and how you plan to use it in your life. Your thoughts are important to us, so don't hesitate to share them. Reading your comments gives us great motivation and encouragement. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, Please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.